I still remember that moment with perfect clarity. Not because it hurt, but because of the silence that came right after. There were more than 100 people in the room, lawyers, judges, names so powerful that just mentioning them was enough to make others uneasy. And all of them were looking at me. My mother had just slapped me in front of everyone, right there on the stage at my sister's wedding. If you have ever been humiliated by your own family in front of a crowd, then you know exactly what that feels like. If you do, comment 1. The sound of the slap was not loud, but it was enough to make the entire room fall completely still. My left earring dropped onto the marble floor, rolled in a small circle, and stopped right at my feet. No one moved. No one said a word. I could even hear the cold stone lightly touching the metal. I did not cry. I did not react right away either. I just stood there, feeling the skin on my left cheek grow hotter little by little. And the strangest part was this: I was not surprised. I had known this was going to happen. I just never thought it would happen like this. You only need to sign it. My mother's voice stayed just as gentle as if she had done nothing at all, as if that slap had simply been part of the plan. She held the documents out toward me. Transfer papers for the penthouse worth more than $2 million, the property my grandmother had left to me. This will be the perfect wedding gift for your sister. Small whispers began to ripple through the room. No one objected. No one thought this was wrong. They were all just waiting for me to sign. I looked down at the papers. My name had already been printed on the signature line. Everything had been prepared in advance, carefully, neatly, perfectly. I looked up, straight into my mother's eyes. I am not signing. My voice was not loud, but it was clear enough. The air in the room changed instantly. The smile on her lips disappeared in less than a second. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. She spoke softly, but her voice had turned cold. I am not making it hard. I am simply saying no. A pause. Then my sister stepped forward in her white wedding dress. Perfect, smooth, not a single wrinkle. Are you really going to do this today? Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes did not. I did not choose today. You did. The tension in the room tightened like a pulled string. I could feel every gaze on me, judging, measuring, waiting. And then the slap happened. Fast, precise, without hesitation. My head turned with the force of it. For 1 second, the whole world seemed to stop. But that was not even the worst part. The worst part was that no one in the room said a single word. No one stepped forward. No one tried to stop it. No one stood by me. There was only silence. A very deliberate kind of silence. I bent down and picked up my earring. It was slightly bent. I straightened it and put it back on, slowly, one movement at a time. As if I were not in that room at all. As if I were somewhere else. Farther away. Calmer. From now on, do not touch me again. I said it quietly, but loud enough for her to hear. Then I turned around and walked off the stage. No one stopped me. No one called after me. No one tried to hold me back. The door behind me opened. Light from the hallway poured in, and I walked out. Without turning back. Without stopping. Not even once. I took out my phone and called a number I had saved a week earlier. It rang only once. Marcus Law Office. This is Claire Bennett. Please tell my grandmother. I paused for 1 second, looking into the empty space ahead. It is time to use the documents. A brief silence. Then the voice on the other end replied. We have been waiting for this call. I sat down on the velvet chair in the hotel lobby. My hand was still trembling slightly. My cheek still hurt. But for the first time in years, my mind felt completely clear. Then I heard movement near the main entrance. I looked up. And that was the moment everything began to change. I thought everything started at that wedding. The slap, the documents, the silence in that room. But it did not. Everything had started 3 years earlier. On a very ordinary Tuesday night, I was sitting in my small apartment in Somerville, eating leftovers and reviewing a design for a client. Nothing unusual, no sign that my life was about to take a completely different turn. Until my phone lit up. My grandmother's name appeared on the screen. "Claire, it's me." Her voice was the same as always, calm, clear, direct. "I need to tell you something, and you need to listen carefully." I put the food down, sat up straight. With her, every word carried weight. "I am updating my will." I was not surprised. She was over 70 and had been a law professor. She always prepared things in advance. But the next sentence made me go silent. "The penthouse in Seaport? I am leaving it to you." I did not respond immediately. I just stared into the empty space in front of me, as if my brain needed a few seconds to process. "To me?" I asked again. Not because I did not want it, but because I did not understand. "Because you are the only one who still visits me every week." Her voice did not change. No emotion, just truth. 10 years, Claire. Every Sunday, you bring flowers. You sit and listen to stories no one else cares about. I swallowed. "Why not Mom or Madison?" A brief silence. "You already know the answer." I did. I just had never wanted to say it out loud. "The paperwork will be completed next month. Marcus is handling it." She paused slightly. "And your mother will not be happy." I smiled a little. A very light smile. At that time, I thought she was exaggerating. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Just a few weeks later, everything began to change. Not loudly, not directly, but quietly, and clearly enough for me to notice. My mother organized a family discussion. At the house in Beacon Hill, a multi-million-dollar home where everything always felt perfectly arranged, to the point of discomfort. The moment I walked into the living room, I understood. They had prepared. My father sat in his usual leather chair, my mother on the sofa, and Madison, perched on the armrest, like she was waiting for her turn to perform. The atmosphere felt more like a courtroom than a conversation. "Claire." My mother's voice was soft, but her eyes were not. "We need to talk about your grandmother's condition." I sat down in the chair, across from them. The only chair. Like a defendant. "What condition?" "She is no longer as clear-minded as she used to be." She said it with certainty. Leaving such a large asset to one person is not reasonable. I looked at her for a long moment. "She is completely lucid," I said. "She knows exactly what she is doing." Madison let out a small laugh. The kind of laugh that is carefully calculated. "You are always there, Claire, always by her side. It is very easy to influence her." I turned to her. "What are you implying?" "I am just stating the truth." She shrugged. "Elderly people are easily affected." Something inside me went cold. Not anger. Realization. They were not just refusing to accept it. They were building a story. And in that story, I was the villain. "If you have a problem, talk to her," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am not taking anything by force." For the first time, my father spoke. His voice was always like that. Calm. Precise. Like in a courtroom. The reasonable thing is for you to refuse the asset. He looked straight at me. Or at least, sell it and divide it equally among the family. It sounded fair. Logical. Almost noble. If it had not come from someone who had never once asked how I had been living all those years. I am not refusing, I said. And I am not selling. The room froze. My mother stopped smiling. Then you should prepare, she said, for the consequences of being selfish. If you have ever been labeled selfish by your own family just because you refuse to sacrifice everything for them, comment 1. I did not react. I simply stood up and walked out of that room, thinking that it would end there. I was wrong. After that night, I started to disappear. No one said it directly. No one officially cut me off. But I no longer existed. My name disappeared from the family group chat. No more invitations to gatherings. Birthdays, holidays. Everything continued. Just without me. I found out Madison got engaged through Instagram. A photo. Champagne glace. A perfect smile. Caption A, new chapter begins. I looked at that picture and realized I was no longer part of that life. When I asked my mother, she just smiled lightly. We thought you were busy with your little decorating job. I said nothing. Did not explain. Did not react. I thought if I stayed quiet, everything would pass. I thought the truth did not need to be proven. I was wrong again. Because while I stayed silent, another story was being told. A story where I was the manipulator, the opportunist, the one who had taken assets from an elderly woman who was no longer lucid. And the worst part was, people believed it. But even that was not the worst part. The worst part was, my grandmother began to change. By the end of that year, she moved into a high-end care facility. Quiet, expensive, and isolated. She said she wanted to rest. To stay away from everything. But sometimes, when I visited her, I saw something in her eyes. Not exhaustion. Not sadness. But caution. Is something going on? I asked her once. She did not answer immediately. She just looked out the window for a long time. There are things better left unsaid for now, she said. At least for now. I nodded. And did not ask further. I thought I was respecting her. But in reality, I had missed a very important sign. 3 years later, I finally understood. And when I did, it was already too late to go back. Because by then, everything had gone too far. And that wedding was not where it all began. It was only the place where everything was exposed. If you could see your family changing but still chose to stay silent like I did, comment 1. In the next part, things will go much further. And I will no longer be the only one being targeted. I thought the worst thing that could happen was being erased from my family. Not invited, not mentioned, not existing. But I underestimated my mother. She did not just want me gone. She wanted me to become a story. A story she could control. And that story was not in my favor. At first I did not notice. Everything was too subtle, too quiet, too reasonable. Until one evening about 3 months after that family meeting, I was invited to a small gathering, hosted by one of my mother's acquaintances. I knew I should not go, but a part of me still believed maybe things were not that bad. Maybe I was misunderstanding everything. I was wrong. The moment I walked into that room, I felt it. The atmosphere was off. The way people looked at me, it was not curiosity, not friendliness. It was judgment. Subtle, but unmistakable. I heard my name, before I even reached the table. That's her. A woman's voice whispering. The girl Victoria mentioned. I stopped. Did not turn around. But I stayed long enough to hear more. I heard she practically lives with her grandmother. Yeah, and then the will got changed. Alongo. Understanding. Conclusion. I stood there. Just for a few seconds. But it was enough. The story had already been told. And I was not the one telling it. I left early. No one stopped me. No one asked why. On the way home I called my mother. Not to argue. Just to confirm. What did you tell people about me? A brief silence. Then she laughed. That familiar kind of laugh. What are you talking about? I'm talking about what people believe. My voice was calm. But inside, something was starting to crack. I only told the truth. She said it lightly. That you spent too much time with her. That you had influence. That you had motives. I clenched my hand. That's not the truth. That's a perspective. She corrected me. People have the right to understand things in the way that makes sense to them. I went silent. Because I realized this was no longer a conversation. This was strategy. And I was losing. Not because I was wrong, but because I was not playing by the same rules. From that point on, everything became clearer. Invitations disappeared. Conversations stopped when I walked in. And every look carried a hidden question. Am I looking at a good person or a manipulator? I did not explain, did not react, did not fight back. I believed. The truth did not need to be defended too loudly. If you have ever chosen silence, and later realized silence does not protect you, comment 1. But I did not understand. Silence is not neutral. Silence lets others write your story. The part that worried me most was not outsiders. It was her. My grandmother. By the end of that year, she moved into Brookhaven. Beautiful, quiet, and isolated. At first I believed her. That she just wanted to rest. But after a few visits, I started noticing something was off. She was still sharp. Still clear-minded. But there were moments when she paused mid-sentence. As if she was thinking carefully. As if she was filtering. One time, while I was arranging flowers in her room, she looked at me. For a long time. Claire. Yes. Do you trust your mother? The question came out of nowhere. I froze. I don't know. I answered honestly. She nodded, as if she had already known. There are people, she said slowly, who don't think they are doing anything wrong. They just believe they deserve it. I looked at her, but she said nothing more. She turned away, looked out the window, and the conversation ended there. But the feeling did not. After that, I started paying closer attention. There were calls she would not answer in front of me. Moments when she asked simple questions, not because she forgot, but as if she was testing something. I asked her a few times, but she always avoided it. Always gentle. Always indirect. Everything is fine, she would say. But her eyes said otherwise. I could have pushed deeper, asked more, connected the dots. But I did not, because I was still trying to keep things calm. I believed if I did not stir the water, the waves would settle. I was wrong. Again. Because while I was trying to keep things peaceful, my mother was preparing something bigger. Not just rumors. Not just isolation. But a public strike. A move I would not be able to avoid. 3 months before the wedding, a letter arrived. Thick paper. Handwritten. Perfect. Madison's wedding invitation. I held it in my hand for a long time. 2 years. No invitation. No calls. And now, this. Formal, complete. As if nothing had ever happened. Before I could process it, my phone rang. My mother. Did you receive the invitation? Her voice. Warm. Unnaturally warm. Yes. Good. A slight pause. This is a chance for our family to heal. I said nothing. Because I knew. The next sentence was the real one. And also the perfect time, she continued. For you to reconsider the penthouse. I closed my eyes. Everything became clear. You can turn it into a wedding gift. Her voice remained soft. Very beautiful. Very timely. Very meaningful. I opened my eyes. And for the first time, I understood. That wedding was not an invitation. It was a trap. If you were me at that moment, would you go or refuse? Comment 1 if you would go. Comment 2 if you would not. I thought about it for a long time. A very long time. And in the end, I chose to go. Not because I trusted them, but because I refused to run. I had done nothing wrong. And I would not hide. Just because they wanted me to disappear. But I did not know that. When I walked into that room, I was not just stepping into a wedding. I was stepping onto a stage that had already been prepared. And this time, I would no longer be the one talked about behind my back. I would be the one attacked directly. I still remember the day I walked into that hotel. Not because it was beautiful, but because of the feeling that I did not belong. The building stood tall in the center of the city. Golden light spilled through large glass windows like a separate world where everything was perfect, controlled, and in order. Just like my mother? I stood outside for a few seconds, not hesitating, just reminding myself of something simple. I did nothing wrong. Then I walked in. The air inside felt almost suffocating. Not because it was crowded, but because everything was too perfect. White flowers, crystal lights, soft music, controlled laughter. Everything arranged so precisely, there was no room for imperfection. And I knew. Tonight I was that imperfection. If you have ever walked into a place where you knew you were not welcome, comment 1. I moved slowly through the lobby. No one stopped me. No one greeted me. But there were eyes everywhere. They glanced at me, then lingered just a little longer than normal. Long enough for me to understand. They knew who I was. Not Claire, but the selfish daughter. My father was the first to approach. He did not hug me, did not shake my hand, just nodded. A very small nod. You came. Yes. We stood there. Two strangers, pretending to be family. Tonight will be important. He said it without looking at me. You should stay calm. I looked at him for a long time. I am always calm, I replied. But this time, I am not silent. He said nothing. Just walked away. Like always. Madison appeared a few minutes later. In her white wedding dress. Perfect. Flawless. She hugged me. Lightly. Without contact. Without emotion. You actually came, she said. I thought you would not have the courage. I smiled. You were wrong. She stepped back. Looked me up and down. Evaluating. Measuring. Did you bring it? I knew what she meant. But I still asked. Bring what? Her smile did not change. The documents. A Pause. For signing. I looked straight at her. There are no documents. For the first time, her smile shifted. Mom said. I do not care what she said. I cut her off. My voice low. But firm. I am not signing. The air between us changed instantly. No more pretending. No more politeness. Only tension. You know. Madison stepped closer. Her voice dropped. We already told everyone. Everything. That you would give the penthouse as a wedding gift. I said nothing. But inside, something tightened. Guests. Tyler's family. Dad's partners. Mom's friends. She listed them slowly. They are all waiting. I looked at her. That is your problem. Not mine. A short silence. But enough to break everything. Are you really going to do this? Her voice was no longer soft. Today. I did not choose today. I said. I just do not agree. She stared at me for a long moment. Then smiled again. But this time, there was no pretending. Fine, she said. Then wait. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone. I moved toward the bar. Not to drink. Just to stand. To have something to hold on to. A woman approached. I recognized her. One of my mother's friends. A judge's wife. You are Claire Wright. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. Yes. I have heard a lot about you. I nodded. I assumed so. She smiled. But it was not real. Very admirable. Spending so much time with your grandmother. Taking care of her. So devoted. I said nothing. Just watched her. I am just curious. She tilted her head. How long do you plan to keep that apartment? A soft question. But not an innocent one. I live there. I said clearly. She blinked. Just for a second. But it was enough. Oh. Well then. She smiled again. Good luck. And she walked away. Faster than politeness required. I stood there, understanding more clearly than ever. The story had been told. Carefully. Consistently. Effectively. I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cold, but easier to breathe. I leaned on the railing, looked down at the city. Lights, cars, distant sounds. Normal. No one knew that inside this building, a performance was about to begin. My phone vibrated. Her name appeared. My grandmother. I am here. I answered. You are already there, aren't you? Her voice was calm. But danse. Yes. Has it started yet? I looked inside. Through the glass. Saw my mother. Smiling, talking. Controlling the entire room. Not yet. I said. But I think it is about to. A pause. Claire. Her voice lowered. If anything happens, you must call Marcus immediately. Why? I asked. For the first time, really asking. What are you not telling me? A longer silence. There are things, she said slowly, that cannot be explained over the phone. I tightened my grip on the phone. Grandma, I need to know. No. Her voice was gentle, but firm. You need to be prepared. Not informed. I closed my eyes. Took a deep breath. All right. If they pressure you, she continued, do not sign. Absolutely do not sign. Why? I asked again. But this time, I already knew she would not answer. Just trust me. A simple sentence. But enough. Tonight? She paused. Maybe the moment everything ends. Or begins. The call ended. I stood there. Alone. The cold wind brushed past me. But in my mind, everything was heating up. Sharper. More dangerous. I walked back inside. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. As if nothing was about to happen. But I knew. I could feel it. My mother was not preparing a conversation. She was preparing a performance. And I was the main character. Not in the way I wanted, but in the way she had already written. And this time, I could not stay on the sidelines anymore. I thought, after walking back into the ballroom, everything would unfold slowly. A subtle remark, a gentle pressure, a quiet form of manipulation. But I was wrong. My mother does not do things halfway. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it immediately. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer a party. It was a stage waiting for its cue. The music was still playing, but softer. People were still smiling, but not naturally. And most importantly, the attention in the room was no longer scattered. It was gathering in one direction. May. If you have ever felt like you were being placed at the center of something you did not choose, comment 1. I walked slowly, past table after table. I could hear conversations cut off as I passed. That's her, Victoria said. She's going to sign. Fragments. Disconnected. But together, they formed a very clear picture. People did not just know. They were waiting. I sat down at my table. Near the back. Not a place of honor. Not the center. A position meant to avoid attention. Or at least, that was the intention. But I was starting to understand. There was no safe place in that room. A distant relative sat across from me. He looked at me, smiled lightly. You look confident. I said nothing. I hope you will do the right thing. He added. Tonight. I looked straight at him. What is the right thing? He shrugged. Family comes first. A familiar sentence. A correct one. But only when it is not used as an excuse. I turned away. Did not respond. Because I knew. Nothing I said would change anything. Time moved slowly. Very slowly. Food was served. Wine was poured. Speeches began. My father stood up. Spoke about family. About values. About unity. I listened. Not because I wanted to. But because I could not avoid it. We always stand together, he said. No matter what. I almost laughed. But I held it back. Because I understood. This was not a speech. It was part of the script. Then came Tyler's father. A man whose presence alone commanded attention. He spoke about the union of two families. The future. Reputation. Big words. Beautiful. But empty. At least to me. Madison spoke next. She cried. At the perfect moment. In the perfect way. Tears. Just enough. Not too much. Not too little. A flawless performance. I looked at her. And for the first time, I no longer saw my sister. Just a part of the plan. I thought, maybe they would stop there. Maybe. They would not go too far. Maybe. This was only pressure. I was wrong. Again. The sound came. Very soft. But enough to cut through the entire room. A spoon tapping a glass. Once. Twice. 3 times. My mother stood up. Holding a glass of champagne. Smiling. That smile. I knew it very well. The one she wore before doing something irreversible. May I have your attention? Her voice carried. Clear. Confident. Completely in control. The room fell silent instantly. Not because they were asked, but because they were used to listening to her. Tonight, she began, is not only about Madison and Tyler. A deliberate pause. It is also about our family. I straightened slightly. Not surprised. Just ready. It had begun. Many people here, she continued, already know about the penthouse my mother owned. A ripple of whispers spread. Small. But enough. I am very proud. She looked around. That my daughter Claire has taken such good care of it. I did not move. Did not react. But inside, everything tightened. And today, she turned toward me. She has decided to do something very special. The entire room turned toward me. Again. But this time, it was not curiosity. It was expectation. Pressure. Demo. If you have ever been forced into a role you did not choose, comment 1. I looked at her. Did not look away. Did not avoid. Just watched. Claire, she called. Her voice soft. Like a proud mother. Would you come up here for a moment? The whole room waited. No one spoke. No one moved. I knew. I had no real choice. If I refused, I would be the one ruining the wedding. If I agreed, I would walk into the trap. A trap. Prepared long in advance. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. Each step stretched out in time. I could feel every gaze. Following. Judging. Waiting. I stepped onto the stage. Stood beside her. Closer than ever. And yet, farther than ever before. She placed her hand on my shoulder. A familiar gesture. But the pressure was not gentle. This is my daughter, she said to the room. Claire. A few people clapped. Light. Polite. And today, she continued, she wants to give her sister a wedding gift. I said nothing. Did not move. Did not react. I just waited. Waited to see how far she would go. And then, I saw it. A set of documents. In her hand. Not random. Not spontaneous. Prepared. Deliberate. All it takes. She opened them. Is a signature. The entire room held its breath. And I understood. This was no longer pressure. This was public coercion. No way out. No place to hide. No easy choice. Only 2 paths. Sign. Or become the villain. I looked down at the papers. Then back up. Straight into her eyes. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This was never about the penthouse. This was about control. And if I signed, I would lose it forever. I looked down at the papers. My name was already there. Printed, clean, precise. No space for hesitation, no space for mistakes. Just one signature. And everything would end. No more pressure, no more eyes watching, no more story. Just sign. And everything would go back to normal. At least, that was what they wanted me to believe. I lifted my head. Looked around the room. More than 100 people. No one spoke. But everyone was waiting. For a decision, for an action, for a perfect ending. The older sister sacrifices. The family reunites. People clap. Everything is forgiven. I had lived in stories like that before, where I was always the one who gave in, always the one who understood, always the one who stayed silent. But this time, I was no longer part of that story. Mom, I said. Not loud, but clear enough for the microphone. I am not signing. A simple sentence. But it cut through the entire room. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. No one looked away. Only silence. Heavy. If you have ever said no in a room where everyone expected you to say yes, comment 1. I did not look at anyone else. Only at her. My mother. The one who prepared all of this. The one who was certain I would agree. Her smile was still there. But her eyes had changed. You are just overwhelmed, she said softly. This is a big decision. Of course you need time. I shook my head. No. I do not need time. A pause. Because my answer is already clear. The air in the room began to crack. Whispers appeared. Quiet. But spreading fast. Claire. Madison stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly. But her eyes were still sharp. What are you doing? What do you think I am doing? I asked. I am saying no. She bit her lip. For a moment, as if calculating. Then she shifted. Into a different role. The victim. You are really going to do this, today? Her voice rose. On my wedding day. Some people in the room began to shake their heads. Just slightly. But enough. I looked at her. I did not choose this day. I said. You did. You chose to tell everyone I would sign. You chose to turn this into a performance. Do not blame me for not following your script. The room grew louder. Attention began to shift. Not completely on one side anymore. But not enough. Enough. My mother's voice cut through. No longer soft. No longer gentle. Only control. You are embarrassing this family, she said. Clear. Every word deliberate. I am not embarrassing anyone, I replied. I am simply not giving away what belongs to me. That does not belong to you, she snapped. That is family property. I looked at her. For a long time. No, I said. It belongs to Grandma. And she chose to leave it to me. Not the family. Not Madison. To me. Silence. But this time. Not shock. People were thinking. You do not understand. She stepped closer. Her voice lowered. But the microphone still carried it. This family gave you everything. I let out a small laugh. Quiet. But enough. What exactly did this family give me? I asked. Not to argue, but to say it out loud. They were not at my graduation. Not in my work. Not in my life. I paused. 1 second. But they show up, exactly when they need something from me. The room shifted. People looked at each other. Uncomfortable. Uncertain. You really think you did all of this alone? She asked sharply. You think you got here without this family? I know exactly how I got here. I said. Not because of family. Not because of connections. Not because of reputation. I got here because I worked. I looked straight at her. And you know that. A pause. Short. But clear. Madison stepped forward again. You are so selfish. No pretending now. You do not even need that apartment. You live in a small studio. You have no one. You have nothing to show. I looked at her. No anger. No reaction. Just calm. Then why do you need it? I asked. Simple. Enough. She went silent. 1 second. 2. 3. No answer. Claire. My mother again. Low voice. Dangerous. This is your last chance. Sign, or... She stopped. Did not finish. Did not need to. Everyone understood. This was no longer a request. It was a threat. If you have ever been put in a position where it is, do this, or lose everything, comment 1. I took a deep breath. Slow. Clear. And then said, no. Not long. Not complicated. Not emotional. Just no. In that moment, everything broke. No more control. No more script. No more perfection. Only truth. And reaction. My mother's face changed completely. Not control. No smile. Only anger. Pure. Sharp. Unrestrained. I saw her hand move. Fast. Too fast to avoid. Too fast to react. And then, the sound rang out. Once. Clear. Final. That sound was not loud. But it cut through everything. Not music, not voices, but skin against skin. Dry, sharp, unmistakable. My head turned slightly with the force. Not enough to fall, but enough to make my whole body pause. For 1 second. Just one. Everything stopped. No one spoke. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The entire room froze. If you have ever been in a moment where time seems to stop, comment 1. I did not look at her immediately. Did not turn back right away. I just stood there, feeling the heat rising on my cheek. My heartbeat slowing down. And the strangest part was, I was not angry. Not panicked. Not broken. Just clear. Clearer than ever before. A small sound followed. Metal touching stone. My earring. Falling to the floor. Rolling once. Then stopping. Right at my feet. I bent down. Slowly. No rush. No trembling. Picked it up. Looked at it. Slightly bent. Not broken. I adjusted it. Put it back on. Every movement deliberate. Clear. As if I was not in that room at all. I lifted my head. Looked straight at her. My mother. The woman who had just slapped me. In front of more than 100 people. She was still standing there. Breathing slightly heavier. Her eyes still burning. But underneath, I saw something else. Not anger. But loss of control. That, she said. Her voice no longer smooth. Is because you do not understand. A familiar sentence. Very familiar. But this time, it meant nothing. I looked at her. For a long time. No avoidance. No fear. That was the last time. I said. Softly. But the microphone carried it. You touch me. A few people shifted. Slightly. But enough to create a ripple. A shift. Small. But real. Madison stood beside her. Her face pale. Not from shock. But because things were no longer following the script. Claire, she said. But had nothing else to say. For the first time, she had no lines. I turned. Said nothing more. No explanation. No reaction. I walked off the stage. Each step, steady. Slow. Intentionnel. No one stopped me. No one reached out. No one called my name. Only eyes. Hundreds of eyes. Following me? I walked past every table. Every person. Faces that just minutes ago were waiting for me to sign. Now, they were no longer certain. No longer aligned. No longer comfortable. Some avoided my gaze. Some looked directly at me. But no longer judging. Just watching. I stepped out through the door. It closed behind me. The noise inside, cut off. Leaving only the silence of the hallway. And my heartbeat. I did not run. Did not cry. Did not collapse. I just walked. Slowly. Clearly. As if I had always known. This was the path I would take. I stopped in the lobby. A red velvet chair. I sat down. For the first time, I took a deep breath. The air here was different. Not heavy. Not watched. Not forced. Just quiet. I touched my cheek. Still warm. But not painful. Not in the way they expected. Not the kind of pain that breaks you. But a marker. An ending point. I took out my phone. The screen lit up. A saved contact. I looked at it for a few seconds. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I pressed call. It rang once. Law office. A man's voice. Professional. Steady. "This is Claire Bennett," I said. My voice calmer than I expected. "Please tell my grandmother." I paused for a second. Not because I doubted, but because I knew this sentence would change everything. "It is time." A brief silence. Not surprise, but recognition. "We understand," the voice replied. "She will come." I ended the call. Set the phone down. Look straight ahead. At the main entrance, where anyone walking in would never know. Everything inside had just changed. I did not turn back. Did not look inside. Did not listen to what they were saying. Did not need to know who stood where anymore. Because for the first time, it no longer mattered. If you have ever walked away from a place where you were treated wrong, without needing to prove anything, comment 1. I sat there. Alone. But not lonely. Not rejected. Not needing to prove anything. Just still. A strange kind of quiet. New. Unfamiliar. And then the door opened. The door opened. Not forcefully. Not enough to draw attention. Just a slight movement. But somehow, I knew immediately. This was not just another guest. I looked up, and in that moment, everything stopped. Not because of sound, but because of presence. My grandmother, Claire Bennett. The woman my mother had told everyone was no longer clear-minded. That she no longer appeared in public. That she was living out her final days in quiet isolation. That woman was walking in. On her own. Back straight. Slow. But certain. Beside her was a man. Gray suit. Clean. Thin glasses. A leather briefcase in his hand. I did not need an introduction. I knew who he was. Marcus. I stood up. Without thinking. Without hesitation. Just stood. "Grandma," I said. For the first time that night, my voice was not fully controlled. She stepped closer. Looked at my cheek. The mark was still there. Faint, but visible. Her expression did not change immediately. It paused. 1 second. Tfo. Then tightened. "I'm here," she said softly. But underneath, there was steel. If you have ever had someone whose presence alone made you feel you were no longer alone, comment 1. She raised her hand. Touched my cheek. Gently. No questions. No scene. Just a small gesture. But enough for me to understand. She had seen everything. "We're going inside," she said. Not a question. Not a suggestion. A decision. We walked in. The door opened again. But this time, everything was different. No music. No laughter. No movement. Only silence. Heavy enough to feel. The first person to notice her was a woman near the entrance. She froze, eyes wide. That's not possible. Another voice. Is that? Then heads began to turn. On everyone. Slowly. Like a wave. Until everyone was looking. My mother. She stood near the main table. Talking, smiling, controlling. Until she turned and saw her. I will never forget that look. Not anger. Not shock. But fear. Pure. Clear. Unhidden. No. She stepped back. Just slightly. But enough. That's not possible. Her voice, breaking. For the first time that night. Grandma, Madison said. Her voice trembling. What are you doing here? My grandmother did not answer. She kept walking. Step by step. Slow. But each step pushed the room back. Marcus walked beside her. Silent. Expressionless. Just present. A reminder. This was no longer family. This was legal. She stopped. Right at the center of the room. Where minutes ago, I had stood alone. Pressured. Judged. Now, all eyes were here again. But not on me. I believe, she said. Her voice steady. No microphone needed. I have a few things to say. No one interrupted. No one objected. No one moved. My name is Claire Bennett. She looked around. At each person. I taught law for over 30 years. A pause. I am fully of sound mind. A simple sentence. But it shattered the story my mother had built. I could see people exchanging looks. No words. But understanding. The penthouse. She continued. That was just mentioned. She turned slightly. Toward my mother? Is a property I left to my granddaughter. Silence again. Not temporary. Not to be divided. Not negotiable. It is hers. Each word. Slow. Clear. Impossible to misinterpret. My mother opened her mouth. You don't understand. Enough. My grandmother said. Not loud. But final. My mother went silent. I did not come here. She continued. To disrupt a wedding. I came here. Because things have been misrepresented for too long. She looked around again. And tonight? We correct them. Marcus stepped forward. Opened his briefcase. Slowly. Carefully. Took out a set of documents. Thick. Heavy. I did not need to see them. I knew. That was not just paper. That was proof. If you have ever waited for a moment when the truth no longer needs defending, it stands on its own. Comment 1. I stood behind her. Silent. No need to speak. For the first time that night, I did not have to explain, did not have to defend, did not have to prove anything. I just stood there and watched. My mother was no longer smiling, no longer in control, just standing still, as if she was finally realizing the game was over. But she was wrong. It was not over. It had only just begun. The entire room was so quiet I could hear the sound of paper brushing against itself. Marcus opened the folder. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just a familiar motion. But that calmness made everything feel more serious. I think, he said. Clear. Slow. We should begin with something simple. He pulled out a document. Held it up. A certified copy of the will. A few people leaned forward. Not out of curiosity, but because they understood. This was no longer a family matter. The signing date. Marcus continued. June 14th, 2019. Notarized. Legally recorded. He looked around the room. The Seaport penthouse. A brief pause. Has been fully transferred to Claire Bennett. Not held in trust. Not to be divided. Not open for negotiation. Simply transferred. Finale. A ripple of whispers spread. Soft, but clear. I saw people begin to look at my mother. Not with agreement anymore, but suspicion. That, my mother spoke quickly, faster than usual, does not mean. It means exactly what it says. My grandmother cut in. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. You have practiced law for over 20 years. She looked directly at her. Do not pretend you do not understand. The entire room shifted. No longer looking at me. No longer at Madison. All eyes on my mother. If you have ever seen someone who always controls everything begin to lose control, comment 1. But that was not the main part. Marcus set the document down. Pulled out another file. Thicker. Heavier. But, he said, that is not the only reason we are here tonight. The air tightened again. More tense. More dangerous. About 3 years ago, he continued, another property owned by Mrs. Bennett was sold. My grandmother did not look at him. She did not need to. She already knew. The house in Cape Cod. A few people nodded slightly. They had heard of it. The sale price, Marcus said. $875,000. A number. But not the issue. The issue is... He paused. Mrs. Bennett never signed any documents. The room froze again. That's impossible, my mother said immediately. Too fast. Too defensive. It was a legal transaction. There was a signature. A certification. A forgery. Marcus cut in. For the first time, his voice sharpened. He pulled out another document. Signature analysis. Conducted by an independent forensic examiner. He looked around. The probability of forgery A pause. 98.7%. Not doubt. Not possibility. Almost certainty. A small sound echoed. A glass touching the table. Someone had dropped it slightly. No one cared. Because every eye was now on my mother. That is, she began, then stopped. Not because she did not want to speak, but because there was nothing left to say. She couldn't, Madison whispered, her voice shaking. She couldn't. She looked at her mother, waiting for an explanation, a denial, anything. But nothing came. She was in the hospital, my grandmother said, her voice steady. Not angry. Just truth. 6 weeks. Hip fracture. No signature. Each sentence. A précise cut. No need for volume. Only accuracy. I waited. She continued, looking straight at my mother. 3 years. Waiting for you to speak. Waiting for you to correct it. A heavy pause. But you did not. If you have ever waited for someone to admit their mistake, and they never did comment one. Instead, she said, you chose to shift the blame. Onto me. Onto Claire. Onto anyone. But yourself. No one moved. No one spoke. No one intervened. My father, for the first time, spoke. Victoria. His voice low. Uncertain. Is this true? A simple question. But it shattered everything. My mother turned to him. Her eyes, no longer controlled. You signed too. She snapped. You were there. You knew. A pause. Then, the truth began to surface. Not from documents, but from them. I signed, my father said slowly. What you gave me. I didn't know. Didn't know. She laughed. A sound nothing like before. You never know anything. The entire room watched. No one spoke. But everyone understood. This was no longer a party. No longer a wedding. This was a collapse. Public. Irreversible. I stood there, watching it all. Silent. No need to step in. No need to say anything. Because for the first time, the truth did not need me to defend it. It stood on its own. It spoke. And it destroyed everything built on top of it. My mother stood in the center of the room, where just hours ago, she had controlled everything. Now, she had nothing. No narrative. No authority. No audience. Only the truth. No one left the room. No one said we should stop. No one tried to fix it. Because everyone understood. This moment could not be stopped. My mother stood there, in the center of the room, surrounded by the people she had spent her entire life impressing. People who once believed her, listened to her, defended her. And now, they were looking at her differently. This is a misunderstanding. She finally spoke. Her voice no longer steady, no longer smooth. These documents, they have been verified, Marcus said. Not loud, but undeniable. Analyzed by an independent firm. Submitted to the prosecutor's office. A pause. Last week. That sentence landed like weight. Silent, but heavy enough to pull everything down. If you have ever seen someone believe they were still in control, until they realized everything had already slipped away, comment 1. I don't know what you're talking about. My mother spoke quickly. Too quickly. This is a family matter. It doesn't need to. No. My grandmother cut in. This is no longer a family matter. A quiet sentence. But it redefined the entire room. You made it that way. She continued. The moment you forged that signature. No escape. No spin. No softening. Only truth. Madison stepped back. Then another step. I could see her hands shaking. Not from fear, but because the world she believed in was breaking apart. Mom, she whispered. Mom, say something. But my mother did not look at her. Did not look at anyone. She just stood there. As if trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. My father stepped back. Just one step. But enough. Enough to separate himself from her. Richard. She turned to him. Her voice urgent. You have to say something. You have to. I already did. He replied. His voice empty. I didn't know. One sentence. Not loud. But final. The entire room understood. No more evidence needed. No more documents required. Just what had just happened. A man in the back whispered to someone beside him. I could not hear the words. But I saw their expressions. No more respect. No more caution. Only reassessment. Tyler, Madison's husband, finally stepped forward. Not to defend. Not to argue. But to calculate. I think, he said carefully, we should speak privately. He looked at my grandmother. Not at me. Not at Madison. Only at the person who held real authority. There may be details. There are no details to clarify. My grandmother replied. Everything is already clear. A pause. And I have nothing to negotiate. If you have ever seen someone shift from confidence to quiet pleading in just minutes, comment 1. But Tyler tried again. The penthouse. No. She cut him off. Firm. It is not yours. Not Madison's. Not up for discussion. Each sentence. Clear. Final. I saw Tyler's face change. Just slightly. But enough. No longer Polita. Now, disappointed. Calculating. And withdrawing. Madison turned to him. Say something. Her voice small. No control left. You have to. He did not answer. Just looked at her. A short look. But enough. She understood. Everything was not collapsing from one side. It was spreading. Layer by layer. Victoria. A voice from the back. An older man. One of my father's longtime partners. I think. He paused. You should find a lawyer. Not a threat. Not anger. Just conclusion. My mother stood there. No words. No reaction. No resistance. For the first time in my life, I saw her. Without an answer. If you have ever thought someone was untouchable, until the moment they had nothing left to say, comment 1. I stood behind. Did not step forward. Did not speak. Did not need to do anything. Because everything I had needed to do, I had already done. Say no. Walk away. Make the call. The rest was no longer mine. My grandmother turned to me. Her expression softened. No sharpness. No tension. Just tired. We should go, she said. I nodded. We turned. Walked out of the room. No one stopped us. No one called out. No one tried to hold us back. Only the sound behind us. Starting to return. Not music. Not laughter. But voices. Whispers. Judgment. The sound of a story being completely rewritten. I did not turn back. Did not look at what they were doing. Did not care who stood with whom. Because this time, I did not need them anymore. We stepped outside. The door closed. Soft, but final. If you have ever walked away from a place where you once thought you had to prove something and realized you no longer needed to comment 1. The air outside was cold, but easy to breathe. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I did not feel weighed down. I'm sorry, my grandmother said. Unexpected. I turned to her. For leaving you alone for too long. I shook my head. No, I said. We just arrived at the right time. A car pulled up. Marcus opened the door. Held it for her. I stood there, looking at the car, then back at the door behind us, where everything had just happened. And I realized this was not the end. This was only the moment consequences began. I thought everything would end the moment we walked out of that room. A climax, a twist, a clean ending. But life does not work like that. It does not close. It just begins to collect its price. The days that followed were not loud. No police storms, no handcuffs, no dramatic confrontations. Just consequences. Quiet, but precise. News spread quickly. Not on the media at first, but within the circles my mother had spent her entire life building. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. Names that once appeared on priority lists disappeared. No one said it directly, but everyone understood. Trust, once lost, cannot be bought back. If you have ever lost someone's trust, you know what is hardest to regain. Comment 1. 2 weeks after the wedding, my mother was called to the prosecutor's office. A meeting. Private. Quiet. But it lasted nearly 4 hours. When she came out, Marcus told me she looked 10 years older. Her lawyer withdrew from the case just days later. Official reason: conflict of interest. But everyone knew that was not the real reason. No one wanted to stand on that side. When the truth was already clear, my father left the house. No drama. No public argument. Just a quiet decision. He moved into a hotel, luxurious enough to maintain appearances, but not enough to save a marriage. Madison and Tyler postponed their honeymoon. No announcement. No explanation. Just, they did not go. I heard from a relative that Tyler's family wanted to reassess. Not emotions, but risk. A cold word, but an honest one. If you have ever seen a relationship shift simply because the benefits disappeared, comment 1. The social consequences came slower, but deeper. An email from a charity my mother had led for over 10 years. Short. Polita. We are temporarily reviewing your position. They did not need to say more. She was no longer invited. An internal investigation was opened. Not because someone had been directly harmed, but because of conduct inconsistent with professional standards. Another way of saying, we do not want to be associated. A small article appeared in the legal section of a local newspaper. No name. No photo. Just a Boston attorney under investigation for document fraud. No one needed the name. The people who needed to know already knew. My phone started ringing. Not from family, but from others. People who had been silent. People who had believed the old story. People who had looked at me that way. I'm sorry. One message. I didn't know the full story. Another. I think we should talk again. And some did not apologize. They just changed their tone. If you have ever seen people change how they treat you, simply because the truth changed, comment 1. One email made me pause. Jennifer Thompson. The woman who saw me at the wedding. Who said nothing. Who believed the wrong story. I want to apologize, she wrote. And if possible, I want to make it right. Not with words, but with action. A project. A contract. An opportunity. I did not reply immediately. I let it sit. 3 days. Just to be sure. I was not reacting from emotion, but from choice. In the end, I agreed to meet. That project became the biggest one I had ever taken. Not because of the money, but because it came from a place that once excluded me. And this time, I did not need permission to enter. But the strangest part was not the work. Not the money. Not the reputation. It was the feeling. I no longer had to prove anything, no longer had to explain, no longer had to stay silent to keep peace. I just was myself. One evening, I sat on the balcony of the penthouse. A soft breeze, the city glowing below. My grandmother sat beside me, silent, but enough. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought for a moment. Did not rush. "I don't feel happy," I said honestly. "But I feel lighter." She nodded. "That's when you know. You chose correctly. If you have ever had to choose between what is right and what is easy, and you chose what is right, comment 1. I looked into the distance. No longer thinking about the wedding. No longer thinking about the slap. No longer thinking about who was right or wrong. Just space. But not empty. Free. I thought my story ended there. But in truth, it had only just begun. I thought, when everything was over, I would feel something big. A sense of victory, a kind of satisfaction, that feeling of finally proving myself. But no, nothing like that happened. The days after felt completely normal. Too normal. I still woke up early. Still worked. Still met clients. Still lived in that penthouse. On the outside, not much had changed. But inside me, something had. There was a space. Not emptiness. Just no more tension. No more holding everything in. No more forcing. No more wondering what others were thinking. Just quiet. One afternoon, I sat in the living room. Sunlight came through the windows. Soft. Ordinary. My grandmother was reading. I looked at her, then asked something I had been holding in for a long time. "Do you regret it?" She did not look up immediately. Turned one more page. Marked it. Then looked at me. "Regret what?" Not speaking sooner. A pause. Not long. But enough to think. "Yes," she said. Directly. No avoidance. "I regret staying silent for too long." I was not surprised, because I understood that feeling. "But," she continued, "I do not regret finally speaking." She looked at me. Clear. Silence does not protect a family. It only delays the problem. If you have ever stayed silent to keep peace, only to realize it made things worse, comment 1. I nodded. No need to say more. Because I understood. In a way I never had before. "And you?" she asked. "Do you regret it?" I thought. Did not rush. "I used to," I said. "I used to think, if I had signed, maybe everything would have stayed calm." She said nothing. Just listened. "But," I continued, "that would not have been peace. That would have been loss. Loss of choice. Loss of myself." A pause. But this time, not heavy. Just real. She smiled slightly. "You learned faster than I did," she said. It took me years to understand that. We sat there. No more words. No need. Some things just need to be understood. A week later, my father called. For the first time. After everything, I looked at the phone. For a long time. Not because I did not know what to do, but because I did. I answered. Claire. His voice was different. Smaller. Uncertain. Are you okay? A simple question. But very late. I'm okay. I replied. Not cold. Not warm. Just true. A pause. Et. He started. Then stopped. I didn't know. I closed my eyes. Not from pain. But because I had expected that. I know. I said. And that's the problem. If you have ever received an apology, too late to matter, comment 1. I need time. I continued. Not to forgive. Not to forget. But to see if there's anything left to rebuild. He did not argue. Did not defend. Just said. Okay. One word. But this time, it was enough. The call ended. No drama. No big emotion. Just real. Madison texted too. A long message. I did not read it right away. Did not rush. Because I understood. Some things do not need an immediate response. If you have ever learned not to react instantly, but to respond when you are ready, comment 1. My life did not become perfect. No miracle. No fairy tale ending. But there was something I had never had before. Choice. I choose who I work with, who I keep, when to walk away, when to say no, without over-explaining. One evening, I stood on the balcony, looking at the city below. Soft wind. Lights glowing. Everything looked the same. But I was not. You know, my grandmother said behind me. I used to think family was something you had to keep at any cost. I turned. And now, she smiled. Family is something that deserves to be kept. A short sentence. But enough. I looked out again. Not thinking about the wedding. Not about the slap. Not about who was right or wrong. Just forward. If you are in a place where you must choose between keeping others and keeping yourself, remember this. You do not have to lose yourself to stay. Miss Story is not about winning. Not about revenge. It is about stopping at the right moment and choosing again. And if you ask me, what was the hardest part of all of it? Not saying no, but believing you have the right to say it.